Greetings. Welcome to Dr. Neil's Spiritual Awakening to Non-Duality. This is Dr. Connie Zweig, and I'll be interviewing my husband who lives in spiritual awakening. You may have heard about this or read about it, but you may not know someone who lives it day to day. We'll be exploring how non-duality developed in Dr. Neil as I've observed it over 25 years, and as he directly experiences it every day. Each podcast will explore a different theme. We look forward to you joining us. Greetings. Welcome back to our podcast. Today we're going to talk about awakening and attachment. There's so many misconceptions and beliefs about the need to be rid of attachment in order to become enlightened. And we're going to use the framework that we've explored in earlier podcasts. So if you listen to the podcast about identity, who am I as an ego? Who am I as a soul? Who am I as spirit, one with everything? This is the framework we're going to use to explore Neil's experience of attachment to family and friends as he's gone through these various stages. Okay, so Dr. Neil, let's start with just kind of the basic ego attachment, what most people experience every day.
Right. So householder life is all about attachment to the body, to the emotions, to the thoughts, to the beliefs, but also to people in your life, the spouse, children, grandchildren, siblings, community. And you can be in service to them or service to the higher purpose in them. But the householder path is not the same as the ascetic path, the sadhu or the monk's path, which involves letting go of family, friends, and various attachments to money, power, and so on.
Okay, but the meaning of attachment changes as we go through these stages, and the experience of it changes.
Correct.
So what is attachment when you're living as a soul?
So when you're a soul, you can have awareness of past lifetimes in which you were connected to people. You can be aware of time between lifetimes when you're disembodied, which I have, and you can be aware of attachment to a body and being incarnated. How does that involve family and friends? Well, usually we come back many times with the same group of people. And the intimacy is more easily recognized.
And so when you're living as a soul, how do you experience attachment to family and friends? What's that like?
Well, it's different to the average person. The average person who's attached in an ego sense, if they lose a spouse or a child or a family member, goes through a lot of grief. And is less when one is living as a soul.
Why? Why is that?
Well, because, I'll give you an example. That will probably explain it better than the theory. My mother died about just over a year ago, and she left the body. I watched her leave the body, and she went to one of the subtle planes of existence between lifetimes, and I've been talking with her there. And so the connection is not lost. So whereas in an unenlightened state, there's a lot of grief and despair and sadness and loss because you do believe that death is an end, even if you have a philosophy of it not being the end. It's part of the ego's attachment. Whereas if you're living as a soul, then you recognize you've had previous lifetimes, you had between lifetimes, and you have future lifetimes. And people don't disappear from your life. They just move on to another plane or another level, and the relationship continues.
And so, what is that like for you emotionally? How has the emotional attached? Because I know at the end of her life, you became very close. You weren't close for a long time, and then you did become close. So, what was that like emotionally for you as she transitioned?
It was sad. There was a brief period of grief, and then there was a connection, reconnection. So the sadness and the brief period of grief was because of ego attachment, which we all have if you're a householder or if this is your spiritual path. But it didn't last. But after a day or two, it was gone. And I was connecting with her in where she was. And she was kind of surprised at me saying hello to her. She said, "Why are you here? I'm dead. You're not." I said, "Yeah, I'm there as well as in the body. I'm with you as well as in the body because this is all part of my consciousness." So that's a soul awareness.
And it's a soul to soul relationship.
Yes.
So you're relating soul to soul, not in your roles as mother and son, not in your other identities, but in as souls.
Well, that's there too. There is that's still around when a person dies. For a while, there's still this relational connection because of attachment, for the person's attachment and your attachment to some degree. So you still call her mother, even though, for example, Connie here, I remember her from a past lifetime, which she was a nun. So it was not the same relationship as now being married. But the soul continues its connection, and the soul incorporates all the previous knowledge. Another example would be my father. My father died when I was 18 years old, and he went on to be reborn, got married, has children and grandchildren in a whole nother world. And I can see that because it's in my consciousness. It's all a part of my consciousness. Everything is there. So if I communicate with him, am I communicating with him on his current lifetime? No, I'm communicating with him as a soul. And that soul has awareness of his current lifetime.
Ah, okay. So in his current incarnation, he probably wouldn't recognize you.
Probably not, but
Right. But in the soul to soul world, you remain connected.
correct. And
Okay.
if I had to visit him where he's at, he's in another country, I would probably recognize him.
Okay. So the third stage we've spoken about is living as spirit, or I am everything. I am pure consciousness, emptiness, one with everything. So in that state or level of consciousness, what is emotional attachment like to family and friends?
In a way, it doesn't exist because everything is present. There is no past, no future, no here, no there, no subject, no object, no relationship. Everything is one pure level of awareness. Nothing. Nobody is closer to me than somebody else. So that level of awakeness, non-duality, can be experienced as emptiness, as fullness, as peace, as oneness. But that level, the idea of family and friends disappears. But not forever.
What do you mean?
Well, the soul awareness is still there, and that's part of the non-duality when one moves through non-duality to the next level. which is awareness of non-duality, and as well as awareness of the specialness and importance of everybody. Everybody's unique and everybody's special, and everybody's created in beauty and love.
And so let me see if I understand this. So you're saying that there's a non-dual awareness when you look at me or your son or your daughter or your friend. And at the same time, there's a dualistic awareness that we are in some way special to you. Is that right?
More like non-dualistic is the initial level in which everything is the same. But non-dualistic and dualistic at the same time is really at this level is about everybody being unique, everybody being a creation of the divine, everybody being special. It's less personal in terms of relationship, and it's more
Transpersonal.
transpersonal.
Okay, but you have a lot of people in your world who are special to you. You have members of a men's group from 20 years.
Right.
You have your kids, your grandkids.
Yes.
Your brothers, you're very close to, your sister, and moi.
Why?
So explain or describe to us your experience of what it's like to see us as divine, but also see us as unique to your karmic relationships.
Well, the best way to explain it is transcend and include. In other words, we initially have an awareness of ourselves as a body, and as emotional, as a personality, and as someone who has relationships, and that never disappears. That sense of separateness never disappears. But we can transcend that and move into the emptiness. And out of that emptiness comes a fullness, and being able to be everywhere out of time, space, in time, space, and then into the non-dual states, the more subtle non-dual states. So nothing gets excluded, everything is added. So, being on the spiritual path often is about negating a certain level in order to experience the next level. So there's a teaching in Vedanta called neti neti. In other words, the practice is, I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm not any of that, I'm not anything. Everything that you become aware of, you're not. So you're negating everything until you get to a place where you have pure awareness, you have consciousness that can't be negated. It seems permanent for that moment. So those are all paths, but those are not the actual ultimate level, because one always has to come back and include what you've left behind, what you've disavowed in your past. So my love for you is not smaller, it's bigger. It doesn't just include your body, our emotional connection, our mental congruency, our lifetimes of being close together, in many lives. Doesn't exclude that. Even if I'm in a non-dual state in which everything is the same, that still exists within that consciousness. But there's another level that's higher than the non-dual state in which you're divine and your individuality is divine.
So the object is divinized. First, the object is disappeared. Like neti neti, the object is eliminated.
Yes, there's no subject, no object.
So now what you're describing is not the disappearance of the object, but actually I want to say divinization, the holiness of the object. Is
Yeah.
that right?
Yes. And uniqueness and specialness, and every point in creation is special, is unique. It's being created this moment. and dissolve this moment. So it's divine. A relationship is not an empty thing. It's a real thing. In fact, in some ways, the relationship is bigger than the physical body or the emotional or the personality or even the intellect. So the relationship is the form out of which it all unfolds. So it's more real than what we usually consider real, which is objects in our world.
So you're saying the relationship, not you and me, it's the container or the dynamic or
Yes, the relationship creates the individuality rather than the other way around.
what do you mean? The two individuals come together. How is it that the other way around?
Well, it appears that two individuals come together because you're focused on the individuality. Okay, but originally we were all part of the same consciousness. So let's call that divine consciousness. And out of that divine consciousness, human consciousness was created. And human consciousness is eternal, and it is constantly unfolding and is non-personal. It contains personal aspects of it. In other words, that's what we call our soul, individual souls, but it's part of the human consciousness. And that the individual souls are connected to each other because the original consciousness is one, is a unity, it's a oneness. And the same with our separate identities. Our separate identities unfold because we are actually one. And that's a way of beginning to experience another level of reality.
So I feel like I'm kind of getting something big here. So most of us think about relationship, a couple, as two individuals coming together and creating something larger.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're saying is that something larger pre-exists.
Yes.
And so if I listen to the description of us as souls going through various lives together, I don't know how you knew me when I was a nun in France, but somehow you knew me as a nun. So then maybe you were a monk there. I don't know. But so then that container is bigger than our marriage today. So it's out of that ongoing, incarnating, evolving consciousness that these two little individuals met again and created a life together. So it's like looking at it in reverse. I'm so used to looking at it as an individual.
Correct.
Oh, that's really great. Okay, so let's come back to attachment now.
Mm-hmm.
So how does your attachment change as you experience that soul to soul relationship and then that I am everything, everything is divine relationship? Whether it's like, let's say with your kids,
Mm-hmm. How do I experience
attachment, emotional attachment, that's our
the
theme.
same as everybody? So if you're on a ascetic path, if you're alone and you're a monk, you're a sadhu, you're following a guru, whose life, that's your only attachment. Then you give up everything in order to serve the divine, in order to become part of the divine, and it's a path. Ultimately, one has to reincarnate, just like I did, in order to actually evolve the human aspect of relationship, which is
To
richer.
pick up the missing pieces.
Richer, yeah. But my relationship with my kids is the same as anybody's relationship because it's egoic. And ego never disappears. That's one of the big illusions. Ego just grows bigger and bigger and bigger. So it includes more and more and more. So, so it doesn't disappear.
But it's egoic, but it's also soul with the kids.
Well, there's a soul connection, yes. And there's divine connection.
And what is that like? How do you experience that with the 3 adult children?
Unconditional love. The divine level is unconditional love. It's the kind of love that a mother has for a baby. It's the closest we can get, or a lover, 2 lovers who are, deeply in love. It's very difficult for anybody to understand who doesn't experience this connection. If you haven't had kids yourself, it's very difficult to understand the willingness to give your personal life up. Like, for example, I reached the state where I realized that my son's life, one of my son's life, was more important than my life. And if there was a choice that had to be made between my life and his life was more important. So the gift of oneness, of separateness, giving your separateness over to a higher level. And it's very difficult. People understand my relationship with my daughter, for example, which is very close and very intimate. Psychologically, you might look at it and say that, we're fused, or we're over bonded. So you might look at it like that, but it's a soul and a spirit level connection, and it doesn't impede her individuality in any way.
Do you remember past lives with her?
Yes.
We've never talked about that.
Well, there's no point in looking for past lifetimes. It's a distraction from the journey, which is really about moving forward, growing more awareness, growing more unity. So, so I don't look at past lifetimes unless it's relevant, unless it's part of something that comes to me, or I'm asked about it.
Okay, so how about attachment to others? Like you have a brother you're very close to.
Yes. Oh, okay. So now we're talking about soul groups. So earlier I spoke about how divine consciousness unfolds a part of itself and creates human consciousness, and that means all human beings. And out of that individual consciousness, human consciousness evolves. And your question again?
Stephen.
Oh, my brother. Well, what happens is people are part of a soul group initially. And so, for example, my soul group is one of service and knowledge and healing. And I share this with many other beings who are part of my soul group, including my brother, who's part of my soul group. And it so happens that we have the same soul group, which bonds us deeply and enables us to feel really close together, inseparable in some ways. Inseparable through death, inseparable through rebirth.
And so what kind of attachment do you feel with him?
Well, it's an attachment that nothing can separate us. Nothing can separate us because we're joined in the source. So nothing can separate us, except there's always the human side of.
Yeah, the personality can get in the way.
Personality can get in the way, like loss. This doesn't mean I can't lose him to death
or have conflict.
Or have conflict or sadness or differences. those are there, but they're not powerful. They don't overwhelm me.
And what about the men in your men's group? Or can you say anything about the kind of the nature of the attachment? Because you've been unbelievably committed to these guys for 2 decades.
24 years. I'm in service to them. So it's really about helping to grow consciousness in this 8 members of the group, including myself, helping to grow more awareness. So every retreat, and we had a habit of having 2 a year, has a focus on something like love, joy, bliss, well-being, peacefulness. One coming up looks like it's going to be on connection, the fact that everything is connected to everything else. So it's about growing spiritual consciousness without talking about it like that. In other words, when I've attempted to bring up the fact that I'm awake, they've all forgotten about it in 2 minutes.
They don't have the framework.
Well, it's not their framework,
Yeah.
So I learned very quickly that that's not a subject to talk about. But talking about other things that are pathways to opening up more connection, more oneness, more wholeness, more peacefulness, more joy, more love, more better relationships. Those are things that I can work on in the group, and I do, and I create coursework for the group, including for myself. So it's the exercises that I participate in personally with the group that I grow as well. So the ego keeps needing to grow more and more with time.
So
rather than the ego needs to disappear and be rejected.
So I have the sense that there's a lot of misunderstanding about attachment.
Mm-hmm.
When we look at people living a monastic life, we see their outward letting go, right? They're behaviorally letting go of family or possessions, homes, jobs, and so forth to enter the monastery or the convent. It's that there's a release of the obvious attachments,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't actually know if internally they're becoming unattached or freer or more liberated inside, because that's hidden from other people. It's the inner world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas there could be people walking through this world who look very attached. I mean, you and I went through a process of selling our house and getting rid of all of our possessions and downsizing, and people around us were freaked out, like, why were we doing that? I found it to be so liberating, just to simplify. But that's not the same as this internal non-attachment that we're talking about, this state of being non-attached to our beliefs, to our bodies, to our people, right? To our goals. I mean, for me, one of my biggest attachments has been to wake up. And it's been a whole journey to really kind of let go of the orientation, the goal orientation to that. And seeing how much of that has been my ego's agenda. So that inner work, I think, is really what you're describing. Because if people look at you from the outside, they would never know what you're experiencing inside.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of kind of spiritual teachings that are misleading because they say, let go of the outside stuff, right? Act as if you're not attached to the outcome,
Or leave your wife or your spouse, leave your children, leave your home, leave your material possessions, and go wander, go walk about, as they say in Australia, or in India, go wandering. So that's part of a spiritual path, that sort of evolved because there wasn't enough time for people to actually incarnate and stay incarnated and stay attached and go beyond that. So, it's better to be attached to everything. That I mean, everything.
The big everything.
Rather than being unattached, to the little things.
Okay, so being attached to the big everything.
Yeah, because we
not
are
the little everything.
Because we are everything. We're not separate individuals. We are everything. Everything is within us. Everything is part of what we are. Everything is, what we are. So, just like emptiness is the same thing. It's the same thing, just an experience from a different direction.
So let's come back to this moment. And as we end here, maybe you can describe what you're experiencing right now.
Everybody and everything is my friend. So that to me is the simple idea of what consciousness is about. Nothing is separate. Everybody is my friend.
Nothing is other.
Nothing is other.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in today. If you found our discussion insightful, there's a good chance your friends will too. And we'd love it if you could take a moment to share this episode with a friend who you believe would appreciate it. Help us spread the word and reach more people. And follow us on any platform. Turn on your episode notifications so you never miss new content. Thanks for being part of our podcasting journey.